You're watching the Tampa Bay and Fort Myers, Florida wind report from October the 14th, carried on through Monday, October the 19th. So normally I do my Chucktown wind reports out of Charleston, South Carolina for the South Carolina and Southeast coast. And tonight I'm doing something a little different. I'm going to do a courtesy call to this area of Florida. My good friend John Kristiniak down in Fort Myers, he is with the Edison Sailing Center, and they're working in collaboration with U.S. Sailing to host the U.S. Junior Olympic Regatta called the River Romp, and that's on the Caloosahatchee River. So we wish them luck as they race their Optimists, Lasers, and their 420s across the river for Saturday and Sunday. So let's talk about the weather pattern for the area. Right now we have this very weak and dry cold front draped over the Tampa Bay area, and that is expected to keep pressing to the south and eventually join this area of troughing down in the southern tip of Florida over the Keys. Now, this high pressure that was in the Gulf is starting to weaken somewhat. We do have a ridge of high pressure building down from the northwestern United States along a negatively tilting jet stream. So right now, let me talk about that for just a second. When I say negatively tilting jet stream, it means we have this sort of pattern going on with the jet stream right now. And negative tilt means it's a downward slope. So when this is occurring, we're just seeing cool, mild air dropping down from the northwest down into the southeast region. So this weekend, what we're going to see is we're going to see a more aggressive dip in this jet stream all the way down into Georgia and even parts of northern Florida. And this is called a Rossby wave when we get such a strong dip in the jet stream where cooler air dives down. So in turn, when that happens, the first thing we're going to see is we're going to see a low pressure, an upper level low pressure, develop over the Great Lakes. It's going to drop down from Canada, develop over the Great Lakes, and start occluding. And occluding means it's going to be being in the process of removing warm air from it. And then when it does that, it's going to drop a cold front down across the United States, and that is going to drift towards the southeast slowly. It should press through Friday night as it gains momentum. Once it gets past the Appalachian Mountains, it should drop quicker down into the southeast. And behind that front, we're going to see that really sharp dip in the jet stream. We'll see a very cool shot of northerly air drop down from Canada. And that's going to be a strong high pressure that's going to set up to the north, and it's going to build in clockwise fashion. It's going to build robustly. So we're talking about 1,031 to 1,035 millibars, biting down into a residual trough or cold front like we're seeing right now with a little bit more juice to it. We'll see the gradient tighten for Saturday, starting Saturday, and then we'll see it tighten into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, where numbers will increase quite a bit from the northeast and east-northeast, and that will be the pattern for the weekend. So that's something to look for. In the meantime, we see these residual northwesterlies, like I said, and then maybe even tomorrow and into Friday we see north over to northeast, and then that'll hold the pattern and then really build up on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Okay, so let's take a look at the water vapor imagery. You can see this very large area of dry air over the southeast region. It's keeping things quiet, keeping things dry, which is good. We definitely need that in South Carolina as things are starting to get back to normal here and rivers are starting to get back down to their preferred levels. Over Florida, pretty dry air. We saw a very weak sea breeze today along the Tampa Bay coast and down into Fort Myers. So we'll continue to see that northerly flow bend down tomorrow. Now, as we get into our weekend, let me take a look at the model predictions here for our streamlines and air temperatures. Now, as we get into, I've got a little bit ahead here. I'm going to back up. Into Saturday. Now, we see this high pressure starting to slide across the United States. There's going to be a little bit of question as to how far south this high pressure dives down into the south. So the lower the jet stream, the lower the high ridge is going to build down. Whoops. The shallower the dip, the more that this high pressure will move into this area and build to the north. So that's going to be the big question. Some of the models have this high pressure sort of doing this number and then building over North Carolina, Virginia, whereas other models have it sort of fading out over Kentucky and then building right over West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So it's going to be a question of which track it takes as to how strong the winds become down in Florida as a result of that. So normally when we see high pressures building straight to the north of Florida, we see that northeast cut really drive down into Florida, and what happens there is we have cool air advecting over warmer waters or sinking rapidly, which causes acceleration. Once it hits the water, it has nowhere to go but across, and it accelerates towards warmer land because it wants to lift once it gets over the warmer land. So that means any open bodies of water will see the accelerations from this. And it's a little bit complicated, but that's what happens when we have this cooler air masses dropping down over warmer waters. We see the winds come up a little higher than expected at times. Sometimes the models catch it at a certain level, 18 to 20 knots, and then you'll end up seeing 24 knots. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Florida, but keep that in mind for the numbers that are coming up this weekend. Okay, so look at air temperatures. Here's our air temperatures starting to drop. We see Thursday, and as we get into Friday, we see temperatures dropping down to the upper 60s, even some of the upper 50s to far northern Florida. As we get into Saturday, we see the high temperatures coming up, but then you see the low temperatures really starting to come down, and even the high temperatures on Sunday only reach the middle to upper 70s, and then we start to see the low temperatures drop down even into the low to mid 50s across northern Florida and into the 60s. So we're going to see a difference of about 10 degrees in your temperatures this weekend, and that's going to bring that cool, that's because of the cool northerly air mass that's going to be dropping down to the region. So looking at the jet stream, I'm going to take a quick peek at where we are now, and here's the jet stream setup. You can see what's in the gray, and as we go on through Friday and into Saturday and then even into Sunday, you see that aggressive dip, and right here in the middle of the jet stream at the core, you have some really strong winds. We're talking 120 to 140 knots of wind that are blowing. This is called jet streaking when it rounds the turn and really peels up to the north. This dip up here is what drives that cool air down. So more on that. Let's look at sea surface temperatures. For the Tampa Bay area and even uprivers in Fort Myers, we're looking at about 82 to 84 degrees. Out in the Gulf of Mexico, hugging the shoreline, we're looking at 80 to 81 degrees. Water temperatures are starting to cool, as you can see right here. This run is from September the 24th and carries all the way to present time now. So you can see how these reds and oranges start to become more yellows, and even some of these greens are signifying some 70 degrees, upper 70 degree temperatures, upper to mid 70s to upper 70s, and even along the Carolina coast, along these cooler shelf waters. Anywhere where the water is shallower along this area is where it's going to start to cool quicker, because it just cools faster than the deeper warmer water. Okay, so that's the sea surface temperatures. Let's take a look at Datascope. Here is Fort Myers, Florida, along the Caloosahatchee River, and here's where the regatta is going to be taking place, just south of the Best Western Fort Myers waterfront. This is where the marina is, and we see these three bridges here, northeast winds swooping down over the weekend. These three bridges may cause a little bit of land shadowing, so it may be a little bit gusty just on the western side of these bridges with those northeast winds this weekend. So we can expect that. I'm going to take the closest station we have here, the Fort Myers SCCF, and even though it doesn't give the best readings in the world, I'm going to go ahead and run all the models on it, because the models are going to be, they're not going to differ because of the wind speeds right now. They're going to be pretty much the same for that area of what they're going to read. So we see tomorrow, as we get into the morning hours, we see that northerly winds start to shift to the northeast, and some of the models are disagreeing. We do see a north-northwest. That could be from residual sea breezing that we see in the afternoon, some of that very light sea breezing that occurs even inland from this direction, from a north-northwest or northerly flow. But most models, even the high-resolution models, are starting to come into agreement by sometime tomorrow being northeast winds, and that carries right on through Friday with even an easterly kick to it by 1 p.m. and even a southerly kick, as there is a cold front dropping down. And I do want to get back to that. When we get this low pressure, we see that cold front drop down, at least to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. We do see this southerly flow come up ahead of it. So if Florida, it depends on where this front is going to be. Now, if it fizzles out to the south, if this low pressure moves over this way and we see the cold front coming down and it fizzles out in this area, it won't be bringing a southerly wind. We'll just see continued northerly winds from the ridge to the northwest across the other side of the tip of the frontal boundary. So that's what I'm saying with this weak frontal boundary on Friday. We could see some variableness down in Florida for that. Along the Carolinas, we'll definitely see a southerly flow ahead of it, maybe even moderate speeds, but we're not talking about them right now. We're talking about Florida. So let me go back to Datascope. So as we see Friday, we see some variability. We see a couple of miles showing southerlies. The other ones keep the northeasterlies going. I might bend towards the northeasterlies continuing, just because of the weakness of the cold front. Now, as we get into Saturday, we see that northeasterly flow start to crank up into the low to mid-teens. Some of the medium resolution models are reading a little bit higher, and then the lower resolution models reading a little bit lower. So there could be some disagreement and alignment on that, but I think the winds, as we get into Sunday, we start to see an upwards trend as the gradient tightens over that area, and we see some much stronger winds start to build in, 15 to 20 knots, and maybe even higher in gusts. And that goes right on through Monday into the afternoon and doesn't start to fade until we get into Monday night. And even Tuesday, we still get a little shot in the morning, and then it fades out. So that's just a model guidance. I have to agree with some of this model guidance just because I've seen the high pressures build down into this area and the gradients tighten and what it does over the warmer water. So that's what we could be looking at for Fort Myers. All right, now, good luck with the regatta down there, John. We wish you the best. Now, we're going to head up to Tampa Bay now, and we're still seeing a few of these northwesterlies, these residual northwesterlies out here at the Egmont Channel sensor and some of the westerlies over in Old Port Tampa. And we're going to go to Tampa Bay Cut J for the model forecast for this week, or the rest of this week and this weekend. So we're looking here, we see the models still in agreement for tomorrow for this northeasterly flow to begin. Now if we run all the models, I definitely want to select all because I think we're going to have a mild sea breeze tomorrow afternoon that could build in. Usually once winds drop below about 5 to 6 knots from a different direction, your sea breeze front will come ashore and it will actually turn the winds to those directions. So let's see for tomorrow. We do see a lot of agreement on this northerly wind. One takes the slower turn and the others. Most of these models agreements for tomorrow do come from the north and northeast. So we may not see that sea breeze after all, since all this model agreement is showing the northeasterly winds. Now as we get into Friday, we start to see all the models are in agreement with northeast winds continuing right around 10 knots and maybe some low teens peaks. The Canadian model in the yellow is showing some low teens peaks. We could stay on the lighter side in the single digits for most of the day because there just really isn't. It's a pretty weak pattern overall with a lot of dry sinking air in that area. And then as we get into Saturday, we start to see these speeds start to come up a little bit. And then as we get into Sunday, the northeast winds really start to crank up. And we're talking about 15 to 20 knots. And as we get later in the day, we start to see the gradient tighten even more as the cold front stalls to the south and we get some troughing lifting up from the Gulf and from the Key West area. And then what we get is an enhanced gradient that holds for the next couple of days from Monday all the way through Tuesday, where we're seeing 18 to 22 knots from the northeast and east northeast. So we're looking at a prolonged period of time there where we're getting these cooler northeasterly winds dropping down into Florida. Okay, so that's Cut J sensor. That pretty much is going to go for the entire area. So anywhere where you have these open legs of winds, I know Skyway East is a great spot to ride, and we'll see some of those winds come up there as well. That'll be a good spot to ride, and some of the other spots around Tampa Bay where northeast winds really funnel in over the warmer water. So a lot of times what you have is these shallower waters along the bay end up having the stronger winds than right down the middle of the deeper channels. So we can we'll see what happens there, but I think that's going to do it for Tampa Bay and Fort Myers wind report. And once again, we do wish John Kristeniak and Edison Sailing Center the best of luck with their regatta this weekend. Thanks for watching.